I'm here with Sarah McNeilly from the Theater on King. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So as a tradition or custom on this show, I wrote down the second question. I always ask every guest, and it varies from person to person. So it's the only question that I write down, really. So that is Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Dork Diaries.
Do you know, I confess, I don't know either of them.
Okay.
Am I a first?
Maybe. I
Am
guess
I?
I guess it's a generational gap thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm feeling archaic and old right now.
I believe they are both like a black and white graphic slash textual novels. Like you have a block of text, and then every page it has a piece of graphic into it. So it's a good children slash adolescent, the good children adolescent book series. And for me, I grew up reading Jeff Kinney's Diary of a Wimpy Kid book series, and I don't think I care that much about the other. So
Okay.
that's what I asked. It's my first like entry into like a real reading. It follows this kid, Greg Heffley, who is an adolescent, and he's a middle school adolescent, and he write down his journals of going through life as a middle school adolescent. And I think at some point I kind of sort of identified with him, but then I found out that he is a massive narcissist and solipsist. Yeah. So my question is, how long has the Theater on King been, established, and how long have you been in it?
Well, it's an interesting history. Ryan Kerr is the creative genius behind the Theater on King, and it was founded, I believe, in 2013. But it actually is sort of the latest iteration or legacy, if you will, of a now defunct theater space that was around in the 90s called the Union Theater. And when that closed, there was a really big gap in the city because, of course, we have plenty of theater venues here, but most of them are much larger and, of course, much more expensive when it comes to rental of mounting your own production. So these smaller spaces are really important because you can sort of afford to fail. So because it's one of the only spaces that offers the venue rental at a sliding scale for artists, it allows for much more experimenting and risk taking than, like if you're going to rent the market hall, say, or show place, you're tend to play it a little safer, so that way you can sell tickets and recoup all of your expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very long way of saying that the Theater on King is sort of this weird legacy that it's almost the Union Theater 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
So it
That's
sort of comes from that tradition. And I have been working with the Theater on King as an artist since I was in the very first production
Oh wow.
when it opened in 2013. And since then, they have moved across the alleyway. So it was originally in the building where the Wolf was.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2018, I believe it was, they moved to the current facility and did a big renovation. So it's accessible. It now has a sprung floor, so you can do dance without breaking your knees and ankles. And just a better facility in that sense.
Let's see. Just an aside, this is my listeners only get the audio version of this, but we are having a live video chat, and this is the first time that the both of us can see each other's faces without the obstruction of masks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. It's nice. Hi. It's nice to see what's under there. I can smile
And
without having to use your eyebrows to really telegraph that.
mhm.
Hi.
Yeah, and it reminds me of how like So would you say that 2020 has been the most unusual year for the theater?
It, well, I mean, it's interesting, right? The theater has survived many plagues.
Hmm.
Uh, in
Wow.
2020, I keep finding myself thinking of Shakespeare. And during the Black Death, he lived across the street from a church.
Hmm.
And I just think of, they would do the death knells, right? And they would ring the bell for each person that succumbed to the plague that day, and what it must have been like for Shakespeare trying to write. We've all seen that meme going around, no pressure, right? Shakespeare wrote King Lear during the plague. I was like, oh my God. Because I think there's a lot of pressure on artists to use this time wisely to create and produce and be productive individuals. And yeah, I have put that pressure on myself as well. So I
Hmm.
often think of Shakespeare and what it was like and how interesting it is now. Part of my morning routine in this macabre ritual is to go onto the Johns Hopkins site and see, how many people have died and those digital death knells. Um, so again, I'm sorry, and I tend to ramble, and you'll have to rein me in. But in an interesting way, no, I don't think this is the strangest year for the theater.
Okay.
I think, of course, it's horrible. Broadway, I mean, just every place is shut down, and for theater artists especially, it is a very collaborative art form, and it's really hard to be apart from people, be it our colleagues or our audiences.
Hmm.
But I also find comfort looking at history and thinking the theater has survived many plagues.
I see. I think, I mean, even if Shakespeare wrote King Lear when the Black Death or the plague happens, there's no way he could have just put it on because at the time, I mean, theater is and was and has been a very community-based activity, and at the time of the Elizabethan Jacobean period, it's basically the equivalent of the movies, and that's why the church hates it because it drove people away from the church as the community-based activity. So I think the plague sort of like affected every single sort of activity where more than five people can gather together, and it's the same with the COVID-19 one. And one of the I think you guys have sort of successfully mm, mm, resurrected this community-based activity by that bottles and can drive that you're doing, which I have contributed to, which is really nice. I do collect them like quite often. So
Oh, we so appreciate your donation. Yeah, it's sort of, every board of director, every, like fundraising is always something that must be done for not-for-profits.
mhm,
And it's always so important, but especially this year, and particularly in the arts sector, which has just been devastated. I mean, we were the first to be shut down, and most people, albeit in diminished capacities, but most people are able to return to work. And of course, performance venues in particular, so dance, music, theater, those kind of things, they just remain shuttered. And
mhm,
so you have a lot of these not-for-profits that still have bills to pay and have, zero box office revenue, zero
mhm,
revenue streams. And that fundraiser is interesting. It's a crazy idea that I thought of,
mhm,
but it sort of came from, I mean, Peterborough especially is really economically disadvantaged. I think we're currently second for the highest unemployment rate in the country,
ah, okay,
second to Edmonton, I believe.
mhm,
And so, you know, um, all of us are hurting,
mhm,
no matter what sector of the economy, no matter what walk of life we're in. Every one of us have certainly felt economically the effects of this. And so this bottle drive was sort of instead of trying to get blood from a stone and, ask for money in a time when nobody has any,
Mhm.
we thought of just trying to do little things and to make it accessible and manageable for people to give.
Mhm.
And it sort of started as a joke, a friend was talking about during lockdown how their alcohol consumption had increased precipitately, and
Right.
that they were strategically placing their empties in the recycling box so their neighbors wouldn't see. And we thought we might be onto something here. We thought we'll take them, and
Mhm.
it's been overwhelmingly successful. We've raised thousands of dollars thus far, and
Wow.
it's not even through. And I think for me, it's been wonderful because I haven't had much contact with the community. I'm a high risk individual for COVID, so I have to be
Mhm.
really, really careful. And I think, I've spent so much of this has been mediated for me. It's all been online.
Mhm.
And online, I have been exposed to the very worst of people. So it's been
Yes.
a really nice experience to see people come together, all walks of life. You'll see Jaguars or pickup trucks, or just people on bicycles, people with just giving what they can. And
Mhm.
whether it be people who never miss a performance at the theater, or an overwhelming amount of folks who have never stepped foot in it
Mhm.
but just want to help in some way. And it's really lifted my spirits to see just goodwill and to see a community come together and support a little theater because they believe that it's important for art to be in this community and for
Mhm.
this place to be here when we can gather again.
Let's see. Yeah. So you mentioned, was it thousands of bucks raised? From what I can gather, a can is worth like 10 cents. So that means there are like hundreds of thousands of bottles coming your way.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I remember the first morning that we went to do it, and we didn't really have any idea if people would show up at all. And there were three of us just sorting. And almost instantly, the theater space just filled up
Hmm.
with refuse, which is garbage, literally.
Yes.
And we were just laughing, all of us, thinking, my
Hmm.
God, we didn't think it would be, this well supported. But I remember I had to actually make paths for us to walk because I thought if the fire marshal saw this, yes, it's madness. Like thousands and thousands and thousands of cans and bottles to be sorted.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad your idea turned out to be a success. And I would like to move on from. So you mentioned that you did your first performance at the King Street Theater. So what was it?
It was a serial.
Hmm.
So it's only now looking back in retrospect that I think, what were we thinking? But there was a core group of us, and it was, I believe, monthly. We did a performance based on a British television series called Pennies from Heaven,
All right, I
starring
know of it.
Bob Hoskins. Oh, do you?
Yeah, I know of the film adaptation. I think Steve Martin starred in it.
I believe so. I think Christopher Walken was in it too, actually. Yes,
Hmm.
yes. So there's a film, and that was based on the British television series. So we did that for, I think we did 13 episodes. So I think it
Okay.
went over, no, maybe we did 2 per month. I
Oh,
can't even
wow.
remember now. It was incredibly ambitious. And
Hmm.
looking back, it was a ton of work. Yes, we did. We did, I think, every 2 weeks, fortnightly, we did a full length performance with dance choreography and just over the top.
Hmm.
And that was, I think, 6 months of our time. Every that's a lot of work fortnightly.
I see.
Um, but it was wonderful.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. That's I mean, can't believe I missed that. Um, since this is a show about music, I would like to ask you, what do you think is the most musical of Shakespeare's plays?
Oh, I mean, that's tough. His writing is so sonorant, you know, the
Mhm.
iambic pentameter. I mean, all of it is so musical. Probably, probably Twelfth Night, but
Mhm.
I almost want to say the Scottish play, just
Hmm.
because it feels so unexpected.
Yeah. Which Scottish play again?
Macbeth,
Oh, right, that one.
which
Yeah.
is like superstitious, right? Actors won't call
Right.
it
Yes.
Macbeth, or else we have to spin around and spit
Ah,
with
right,
all
right. That.
our weird
Yes. I.
superstitions.
Right. That. Yeah, I've heard of that. I think in my opinion that would be the Tempest.
Okay,
Well, so I'm a trans student, so I recently went through a was it 4 month long course with Andrew Lowe on the Tempest itself. Like
cool.
we went through the Shakespeare play as well as the adaptations, um, including the cinematic ones. Um, I'm really impressed by how Julie Taymor, she's a wonderful theater and film director. She handled the play, and you should see the film itself. It stars Helen Mirren as the female
Oh,
version of Prospero. Uh,
awesome.
yeah, and the handling of the music is incredible. There's a score that mixes in orchestral with rock and roll music,
Cool.
and Ben Whishaw plays Ariel. And I don't know if they use any vocal effects on his voice, but his his vocals are really good, like impeccable. And his character design is well designed to look like David Bowie in his thin white Duke era.
Awesome.
Hmm. Yeah. So tell me more about your musical taste. Like, are you a big fan of musical theater or music, like as in like classical and popular music?
All of the above, actually.
Oh, really?
I have acted in a lot of musical theater.
Hmm.
Uh, at the risk of sounding like a snob, it's not my favorite. It's a lot of hard work. I have great respect for people who do that. My tastes for theater, I tend to uh, prefer just more straight theater
Hmm.
or theater with music in it. There's a difference. Can I
Hmm.
describe it accurately? No. But I also love popular music. I've
Hmm.
been in a few bands, and I have a great affinity for symphonic works as well. My brother was a concert musician.
Hmm. I see. I think a good litmus test as to like who's the musical theater snob is to ask them, what do you think of Andrew Lloyd Webber? So that's it. So I'm passing on this question to you. What do you
Yeah.
think of Andrew Lloyd? Oh
um,
boy.
I don't want to sound snobby. It's meh. Meh.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds
Yeah,
about
there's
right.
there's some good stuff out there.
Mhm.
There's some better stuff out there.
What's your favorite and least favorite musical?
Musical.
Musical.
Uh I think Wizard of Oz.
Hmm.
There you go. I tend to with musicals, um, I really like the ones that just go full on fantasy.
Hmm.
And
I
then
see.
it's like, of course they're breaking into song because they're talking animals.
Hmm. So yeah, was there like a Broadway version of that? Because I've only seen the film directed by I think George Cukor and starring, of course, Judy.
Judy, Judy, Judy. I believe there have been.
Hmm.
I think so. It's like very common. You'll see high school productions of it and that kind of thing too.
Did you happen to see the film Judy starring Renee Zellweger as Judy Garland?
Yes, it's so good.
Oh yeah, yeah. Does she like perform all of the numbers herself?
I think so because uh, she did Chicago and other musicals as well. So
Right.
I'm pretty sure she's a triple threat.
Hmm. Right. I was going to ask you about that as well. What do you think of Chicago the musical? And have you seen
Loved it.
you've seen a production of it? Yeah.
Yes, here in
Mhm.
Peterborough, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow, really?
I believe it was St. James Players. They did
Hmm.
that years back.
Oh, that's cool. I think my favorite musical, and okay, so my answer will determine whether or not you're a snob. Stephen Sondheim's is what's it? Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, and the Tim Burton film adaptation is my favorite of all, starring Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter.
That
Yeah,
one's pretty cool.
yeah, it's great because neither of these, neither Depp or Carter are like good singers, but the characters are not meant to be, good singers anyway. They are like the low life of London who are homicidal. And yes, and I would really love to acquire a recipe of Mrs. Lovett's secret pies.
Tastes like chicken.
Yeah, yeah, strangely enough. So yeah, popular in classical music. So what rocks your boat?
Uh, I've always been, I mean, I appreciate all genres.
Hmm.
My favorite certainly would be like rock and roll, punk, that kind of stuff, new wave. But that said, I think what it is when it comes down to it is we appreciate people doing things well. So even if it's not my taste, I can still really appreciate and respect the artistry. And, like we enjoy virtuosity,
Hmm. Right. Right. I think my questions are half of them are to determine whether or not my guest is a snob in music. But so
Oh,
uh so yeah, Patti Smith, what are your thoughts on her?
oh, she was a huge part of my formative years.
Oh yeah?
She's like a hero of mine when I was young.
Tell me more about that.
Uh, well, there, I think in, well, I mean, I could go on and on about this. I think particularly because she, whether she is punk or came from a punk tradition, prior to that, women in music could be, like your Joni Mitchell, Marianne Faithfull type, and like folky or pretty or, all of those things. And all of a sudden, punk comes along, and because of its do it yourself ethos, um, no, I mean, so many of the musicians, regardless of their gender, couldn't even play their instruments. It wasn't about virtuosity; it was
Oh
about
no.
ethos.
Hmm.
And I think that's when we really start to see women emerge who are pushing those boundaries of pretty or sonorant or all of these different things. And yeah, I was just so enamored and enchanted by Patti Smith and her ability to bend gender and expectations.
Right, yeah. Which reminds me of the iconic artwork of her debut album Horses, taken by Robert Mapplethorpe. Right. It's um it's incredibly enchanting in a strange sort of way. And the feminist writer Camille Paglia said that that is the most important or beautiful or amazing. I'm not sure about the adjective, but it is among those neighborhood photograph of a woman ever to be taken. And it was taken by her like a longtime creative partner and friend, Robert Mapplethorpe, in which their relationship was documented or retold in Patti Smith's incredibly good book called Just Kids. And Mapplethorpe himself is a very transgressive photographer. Like he does not care about beauty standards at all. And But your point on Marianne Faithfull, have you heard of her album Broken English?
Maybe.
It's an incredible album. It was released in 1971. No, I think 1971 or 1979. I think 79, and that was when that was like way after her her like phase with Mick Jagger and the Stones and such, and she had been through a lot. She had been through drug addiction and homelessness, and she came back with this album, and her voice actually did not sound like pretty at all. It sounded
Mm.
like jagged and edgy, and she sings these like brutally honest folk songs in this really jagged, vocals, and I think that is, I think that is great. That is powerful. That even more powerful if she sings it in a
Hmm.
naturally beautiful cadence. If you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yes, there's something truer about it, I suppose. It's
hmm
raw.
hmm And I believe that's is it the Susan Boyle who was in the Britain's Got Talent in 2008?
Yes, that's right.
She's the one with the unusual vocal chops, right? Or that is that what? Or she was the one with the
I think she was
operatic.
the one that, yeah, just sort of blew everyone away. I think she
hmm
went viral just having this like incredibly operatic and,
hmm
like just impressive range and whatnot. And I think, yeah, I seem to remember that was a viral moment. What has become of her? I couldn't tell you.
hmm Yeah, me neither. Yeah, which reminds me, yeah, I think we don't really have enough of the women in the line of Patti Smith or Marianne Faithfull or PJ Harvey, even though they're still active musically to this day, like who are busting onto the scene, who are not either conventionally beautiful or vocally of the accepted aesthetic standards. Like we don't have those women who are challenging the what do you call it, musical or aesthetic status quo. Every pop star these days is too sanitized, and
Hmm.
this reminds me actually of Madonna, actually, because she is a conventionally, I think she's quite a beautiful woman. She's incredibly beautiful, but the materials that she released is incredibly out there. Like, and she got popular because of it.
Yeah, she certainly pushed the boundaries
hmm
and, did incredible things for the genre of pop music. I think Lady Gaga is certainly a modern day Madonna.
Oh yeah, yeah, she is definitely following her footsteps. And which brings me to the theme of musicals again. A Star is Born. What is your favorite version of it?
Ah, I don't know. I'm terrible for picking favorites. I'm just one of those people that's like, I like everything. I like everything. I thought it was really well done.
hmm
It was really nice to see it because I think, as an actor, you're never really turning that off. So it's really difficult to see works and not think like a director or not
hmm
think like an actor. And I really enjoyed her performance. It was wonderful to see someone make that transition from music to film. And she's got her chops. She did a great job.
hmm Okay, that's great. Yeah, so I do remember there are at least like four versions of the movie that are that were made, and I thought it's a the story itself is a bit of a Hollywood staple, isn't it? Like there's of course the musical, and there's the sort of like the young starlet and the faded you know the faded guy or the faded former famous singer and whatnot. And I know that George Cukor, the director, I think of The Wizard of Oz, he did a version early on with Judy Garland herself.
Oh,
And
really?
yes,
I
yeah,
only knew the Barbara Streisand version.
right. Streisand Christofferson one. I actually have the vinyl soundtrack for it.
Oh, wow.
hmm
Outstanding.
Yeah, and I have yeah the soundtrack for like a great bunch of musicals, including Jesus Christ Superstar and Cabaret.
Nice. Oh, that's a good one.
hmm Yeah, I think you were there when they when the King Street Theater put it up, right?
Cabaret?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was last year.
Was it?
Yeah.
You know what? Last year, I haven't been able to get out much. I've had some health problems.
Mhm,
So unfortunately, my public life has taken a hit. I
mhm.
would have liked to have seen Cabaret. I love that show.
Oh yeah. Me too. I find it quite intriguing. Liza Minnelli is incredible, and yeah, the I think the show last year when it was put up by the Theater on King, it's I think one of the stars or one of the people who perform in that show is Mary Grace Murphy. I wonder if you know her at all.
Possibly. The name sounds familiar.
I think she's been involved with the King Street Theater for a lot of time. Like I think I've seen two productions of the King Street Theater. One is I think a comedic take on the Grimm's fairy tales. I'm not sure the name escaped me, and Mary Grace or MG as she calls herself starred in it. And the second
Outstanding.
one, and the second play was directed by her, and I I couldn't remember the name of it. It right laugh out loud, cry quietly. That is the name of the play, and
Okay.
it's a it's this urban comedy about a that focus on many different characters as they sort of like navigating the date scene. I believe it
Okay.
was set in New York. And speaking of New York, here's well, I'd like to tell you about the greatest movie opening scene of all, Woody Allen's Manhattan. It opens with the New York cityscape, and the song that was being played is George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, and then Woody Allen's character Isaac, he was writing the manuscript of I think his autobiography, and he has to start over and over again. He constantly says chapter one, and then he thinks of two or three sentences, and he thought, well, just scrap that. This is too snobby, and this is too pretentious, and this is too earnest. So there's that. So that brings me to at least classical or composed music. What rocks your boat on those?
Huh. I think probably Stravinsky has to be
Hmm.
my favorite. Um, not to dance to. That's impossible.
No.
That's impossible. Mike, I
Hmm.
can't count like that.
Hmm.
But I really, yeah, and sort of like moving into that time period as well. Like I really enjoy a lot of minimalist works.
Hmm.
But yeah, Stravinsky is just Rite of Spring in particular has to
Oh
be my
yeah.
all-time favorite work. It's
Hmm.
just so dramatic.
Hmm.
But I again, it's really hard for me to pick favorites. I love all symphonic music.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I believe you may have heard the story before, but it when the Rite of Spring was first put on, it I think it caused riots.
It
That's,
did. I think it was 1914, I want to say, in Paris.
I believe 17. 17.
Oh, was it?
Hmm.
But yes, it was in Paris. And what started as heckling, like people were just enraged. And I'm
Mm.
not sure if it was just because of the music, which of course was so unconventional, but I think it also was Nijinsky's choreography, which
Aye.
once again, you know, this seems to be a theme of our conversation. I mean, ballet is so
Yes.
beautiful, you know,
Hmm.
and using the body in this elegant way. And it was the first time that these contorted bodies were pigeon-toed, and it was just so unconventional. And once again, you know, it wasn't afraid to be ugly.
Hmm.
Um, which I of course this is mythology and it's
Yes.
contested whether or not it was a real riot or not. But I always love that story because to me, I think it really, even the fact that a myth could be created from it, whether or not it's
Hmm.
true, I think it speaks to the power of art,
Hmm.
that it can move people. It does something.
Hmm. I believe that's why rock and roll became such a popular thing, and that's why back in the day, like the older folks would be like, uh, virulently against it. And if you can remember, there's this guy, Pat Boone, who's, I think he's still active to this day, and his main job is to sanitize Elvis songs to fit the sort of like religious Christian ears and all that. And what's amazing about rock and roll to me is that I, I mean, the vocalists are not part of the mezzo soprano tradition,
Hmm.
but and of course the guitar is such a new thing, and for the people who do not use guitar in such a distorted manner, they would think that it's just noise. But somehow it managed to capture a generation, and even though of course rock and roll has gone through especially to this day, it's sort of fallen out of favor, it's still a very enduring art form. It's very new, but a very enduring art form that always seems to find its audience in whichever decade that it's in. And I find that to be amazing.
Yes, it's true. It certainly has changed with the times.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Would you say that Andrew Lloyd Webber is a rock star musical writer?
He probably thinks he is.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes.
Oh, it's terrible. I feel like a horrible human being. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's interesting to, whenever you see these genres, and maybe this is just it, right? Like how it's kind of hypocritical of me to say I love Stravinsky because he really pushed the boundaries of the genre, or John Cage or whoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not to give Andrew Lloyd Webber his credit. So yeah, like I think, again, right, we appreciate virtuosity. We like to see people do things well, and I think we also really like to see people taking something and doing something entirely new with it.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah. Another person that I think I've mentioned this earlier in chat is Julie Taymor. She's quite the creative, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but eccentric mind too. I've only seen a few of her films. One of them is an adaptation of Titus Andronicus by Shakespeare, which I think everybody should see. But she made a name for herself in adapting The Lion King into a musical, which became a really big
Okay.
hit. Yeah, and I believe she did the same thing with Spider-Man as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got to see The Lion King, and I love puppets, so
Yeah.
it was just incredible.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite musical number off of the Lion King?
Oh, the opening for sure.
Right.
I mean, come on, you have us.
Uh, I would pick sure, Hakuna Matata is really good, but I would pick the "I Can't Wait to Be King" when the young
Okay.
Simba was being singing joyously about the prospect of his dad dying and him becoming king, which eventually came true.
I've never looked at it in that light.
Yeah, so we've reached the end of our chat, and I would like to leave the task or the honor of closing the interview to my guest. So, Sarah McNeilly, what do you have to say to close off the interview?
Oh, that's tough. No pressure. I have to say, dear listeners, if you have any inclination whatsoever to make art, then do it. Don't worry about doing it well. Don't worry about doing it for others. Just do it.
All
You
right.
will enrich your life and the lives of others.
All right. Thank you for your nugget of wisdom, Sarah McNeilly, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your time.